Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lawyer Interviews. I'm your host, Jeff Dillon. Today's Lawyer Interviews is being sponsored by the team at Law TGIC and Select America's Legal Elite in Media. Today, we have our guest, Gregg Goldfarb. He is a owner of a law firm, a podcast producer. He is a lawyer working out of Miami. Gregg, thanks so much for joining us, and I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself.
All right, thanks for having me on. So I'm an attorney downtown, Miami, Florida, and my podcast is Cut to the Chase, colon. I've been doing that for a couple of years. I've been an attorney for 27 years, Miami, right downtown, right across the street from the courthouse. And doing a little bit of an Instagram page, just trying to keep people, my clients and my audience, up to date on mass tort cases. There are a lot of mass tort cases. People, I'm sure, seeing Camp Lejeune, is it a camp? Is it, how can people be getting hurt at a camp? How can people be getting water contamination at a camp? That's all over the place. So I try to give people little snippets from my podcast on my Instagram, just kind of, educating my, audience or whoever comes across what's going on. Try to give public interest information. A lot of mass torts these days are really public interest stories. Sexual abuse everywhere, from the church, schools, just any places of power. It just never seems to end. And there's a lot of, people that were abused horribly 40 years ago. They don't even realize they can actually go back to court. Most people, those kind of cases, you only have like 4 years to go back to court. But the states have, realized that people with sexual abuse don't like to talk about it. They hide it. And then years later, they've really suffered in many ways, their entire life, economically, socially, and what have you. So
Wow.
That's sort of where I am right now, and then there was the 26 years beforehand.
Yeah, let's get the from A to B. I want to know the origin story. That would be great to hear how you got there. Basically, we start off wanting to know how and why did you become a lawyer?
So, that's, I think cable started when I was in high school. And, you would see infomercials late at night, and they would have, some get rich quick schemes. And it would infuriate me. There would always be some guy, some, loser guy on a big boat with all these beautiful babes, telling you how to make it rich in real estate. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, this actually is probably effective, but it's such a public disservice to, you're just like captivating these people's attention at 3 a.m, quick, how to make money easily or whatever with a bunch of broads in front of you. Like, hey, this is what I got. So there was a couple of things like that sort of happened. I wasn't really that big with the tele-evangelists and people, on the stage and falling down and like coming up. And I just said, I don't like that.
Okay.
So that was, and my father isn't a lawyer. He actually is 91, Max Goldfarb. He's sort of a legend down Miami, the nicest, most humble guy you'll ever meet. Talks to anybody. A lot of attorneys, they just like, if it's not a big case, I'm not even talking to the person. He talks to everybody, whatever. So he was a good influence on me. And, I just kind of became a lawyer through, osmosis, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering if you were going to say those get rich quick schemes. You're like, yeah, that's perfect. That's what I want to do. But it sounds like those were the villains that you didn't like. Okay.
Yeah, there might have been a little part of me where I was like, wow, and I'm like, no, I'm not that stupid,
Got it. And so you went to law school in Miami.
Yes. I went to undergrad in University of Virginia, kind of peaked academically, then, realized that women were out there, that might like to talk to me. And, then just things kind of, they peaked. And then I went to University of Miami Law School, good law school. And, I kind of was an average law student. And that kind of, in a way, made me who I am. I think if I was a really good law student and, got job offers from big law firms, I would have done, there's a good chance I would not be here right now.
I see.
You know?
So you were struggling with all the attractive women in Virginia. So you
Yeah,
decided, let me go to Miami. That's where I'll definitely be able to focus.
that's you got well, but I grew up in Miami.
Yes. Okay.
So I had several justifications that sounded legitimate.
Yeah.
One was I said, if I go there, I can get a little bit of a head start on, getting clients. And because when you're in law school, you're going to do, what it is, you're going to maybe work for the state attorney's office, or you get involved in a political campaign or whatever. So I figured, why not? I had
Mhm.
a feeling that I was going to end up wanting to live in Miami. So,
Great. Yeah.
but your point is well taken.
Yeah, just a little light went off. I was wondering, but yes, understood. And what happened? You graduate law school. I know eventually you've started your own firm, but in between those parts, what kind of work did you do right off graduation?
So, the last year of law school, maybe the last year and a half, they have guidance, to get you work. And they wanted nothing to do with me because, I guess I was sort of hopeless. So I went to the public defender's office, volunteered there for 6 months. I actually got some trial work as like second seat, that you couldn't do it first seat, but I had one.
Hmm.
I guess that was my first trial, was like a guy who had broke into a drug dealer's house. The drug dealer was paralyzed from the waist down, and he had the drugs under his bed or whatever. My guy knew that, it was cocaine or whatever. So he goes there with a gun and he shoots between the guy's legs, where basically, he was handicapped or whatever. And
Wow.
yeah. And then anyway, so that was my first trial. So I represented him. They offered him I think 17 years. He said he trusted me, and I was like, you
Yeah.
I might have some ethical duty right now. That you shouldn't. And we
Right.
tried it. Me and I can't remember the public defenders. She mainly tried it, but I was there.
Uh-huh.
I sat down at the table, whatever.
Trial by fire in a way,
Trial by
I guess.
fire,
You really got to uh you just had to jump in, I suppose.
yeah. Listen, you just ask questions. You right. Before, when you can get segmented into a trial where you just have one witness or whatever, or you're going to make one argument to the judge, and the lead attorney knows they got to give you some harmless part, and
Yeah.
the judge knows it too. So you kind of, got there. So after I didn't, I basically realized I was not going to get a job from a decent law firm. My best friend at the time, he was a year ahead of me in law school. We went out, we played golf, and we ended up getting teamed with two other lawyers, and they were in their 50s. Okay. And they were pretty jovial, but they were definitely overweight, out of shape, and smoking cigarettes. Back then, it was kind of cool to smoke cigarettes. So
Yep.
we were smoking cigarettes, and they were just like, every other word out of their mouth was just awful or whatever, but they were funny or whatever. So, my best friend, David or whatever, was a very good student. He got a job at Greenberg Traurig, the best of the best or whatever. And, I said to him, I said, listen, I don't want those two guys to be the ones that hire me, and that I'm going to be learning from them.
Right.
So, so I said, I got to do something. So
Yeah.
I started my own, I liked the environment and all that. We live down near the Everglades. So I started an environmental group called Clean Miami River. And the Clean Water Act basically says that you cannot pollute a water body without a permit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are a citizen, can sue you, and gets the government involved or whatever to stop that pollution. And then the attorney will get paid if you win. That would have been me. So that was my game plan, was, okay, I'm going to do environmental work. I'm going to go to the Miami River, which was a polluted water body. And I'm going to get to know the people that own the property and all
Yeah.
that. Hopefully find the ones that are, obeying the law and are getting, polluted on by others or whatever. So, I mean, it sounded like a good game plan, but that did not work. But instead, I ended up getting hired by a gentleman by the name of Richard Grosso, who's a pretty big name environmental attorney in Florida, maybe even
Mm-hmm.
beyond that. I think his wife is involved in the Biden administration. maybe with the Department of Interior. In any event, somehow or another, I got connected to him, and he had a big trial going on, and he had, I think, like 9 environmental groups. Well, 3 of them were basically a big pain in the ass. Okay.
Yeah.
And he really didn't need them. So and they had a little bit of money, just, so it was a 5-week trial, and they had like $7,000 between the 3 environmental groups, and they hired. I said, sure. I'm like, I
Right.
can
Yeah.
go down to the Keys for, a month, and
Not bad.
I'm sure you're going to, feed me or something,
Yeah. Did they?
And so I did that. That's how I started.
Okay. Well, I'm first of all, uh, I gotta say, it's nice to hear this stuff because I'm also a South Florida guy. I'm from Parkland, Florida, actually.
Oh,
So
really? Wow.
I like hearing protecting the Everglades stuff. We used to, do the airboat tours and stuff like that all the time. But anyway, uh, although this was in the Keys, I guess that's pretty cool. But uh, the so what happened? Why didn't you keep going down the environmental law path?
So I actually got one more interesting case after that. Well, there were 2 actually. One was immediately after the first 5-week trial, another administrative trial started. The first case was in front of an administrative judge, not a jury. And very political. So, we won certain issues or whatever, stopping development in the commercial wetlands, commercially owned property. If they had wetlands, we got an order to that effect. A lot of it was hurricane evacuation based. They basically, the laws were that you have to be able to evacuate your people. You can't have so many people there that, but they wanted to develop and develop and develop. So we created some arguments. We hired an expert who did road construction. So part of their case was another application by the Department of Transportation to build through the Everglades, to expand through it. So the Everglades, when you drive out, maybe even before your time, it was one way in, one way out. There was a couple little sections where they had, so people started to think there was no barrier in between, that it was dangerous. And so the whole idea became, put the barrier in between and now let's expand. Well, you really don't need to expand and put 2 more lanes, because that just wipes out a bunch of the Everglades a bunch of the wetlands in the Everglades. Okay. So same thing, Clean Water Act, which is what I was trying to become an expert in. All right. So that was the next trial. That was 8 weeks. We lost that, but they had to get a federal permit. The federal agency decided, after hearing our song and dance, they weren't going to issue the permit. So I'm like, holy shit, I won. All right. So then I got a third case. It got followed by the Wall Street Journal, a pretty big environmental group called PEER, Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. They hired me. I guess by that point, they heard that I was becoming sort of the wetlands evacuation guy. So they said, hey, listen, why don't we just try to stop all the development in the wetlands? So I filed like an injunction, and the temporary injunction got granted. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Wow. There's no way. Even as I filed it, I'm like, I have no chance at all. So, and then all of a sudden the Wall Street Journal, the Florida edition, they used to have a Florida edition, picked it up. They picked up that story, and I was like, I was off to the race. I wasn't making much money. I was making a little bit.
You're a big deal in this area.
Yeah. So, and then, next thing I know, the judge just out of the blue dismissed the case. I guess he realized that I really didn't have a case. Maybe I think it was William Hoovler, who was a huge, huge name, federal judge down in South Florida. I might be getting that wrong or whatever. Anyway, by that time, Rodney King had happened. You know Rodney King?
Yeah, the riots kind of thing, or is that what you're talking about?
Exactly, the police brutality. So, sexual harassment and Rodney King kind of came on the screen. So at that point, I was kind of burned out of the environmental litigation, but there were people, there was no money, and they wanted a lot, I couldn't survive.
Yeah.
So then Rodney King, I'm thinking, oh, that's civil rights. That sounds good. Nobody's doing civil rights. All my colleagues are doing auto accident cases, slip and falls. So I was, logically, I'm thinking maybe I'm going to carve out a niche, and I've shown that I can, pick up a case right out of the gate, figure it out and try it, not even know what's going on. So then I became like the police brutality guy.
Okay.
And there was a case that was 10 years old, and there was a pretty big law firm that was handling it, and they were looking to pass it on to somebody else. So
Hmm.
they didn't really know how to handle a
Does that
civil
mean
rights.
that they were working on it for 10 years and then they're like, I'm tired of this and now here you go? Or is someone came to them at like, hey, this happened 10 years ago?
No, yeah, because you can't file, you have to file in 4 years for the most
Okay.
part. 3 years, sometimes 2 years, depending upon the case. But usually by the fourth or fifth year, the laws, you got to file the case. So basically, a big law firm got it. It was a high profile case when it happened. It was 1986. A high school teacher or public school teacher, Arthur Walker, just the nicest guy, African American, and he had bipolar condition, and he was living with his girlfriend. A neighbor had just moved in, and he was locked out, and so he was outside for a long time. It was hot, and the story, from what I understand, is he decompressed, so he starts to like fidget and all that. The
Ugh.
new neighbor sees it, calls the police. So 8 white police officer basically all testified that all they did was wrap their arms around his stomach to pin him down to the ground. So then they charged him with battery on a police officer, resisting arrest, like 20 counts of that or what have you. Meanwhile, he ends up in the hospital for 3 months, couldn't walk, and was completely pulverized. So like body swelling everywhere. Like really, you're only going to get body swelling everywhere on when you're, ejected from a car
Hmm.
or beaten to smithereens.
Gotcha.
So I won that. I won that
Hmm.
trial, and I got $1.2 million. I took it over from the other firm. They didn't know really what to do with it. I
Okay.
knew what to do with it. I knew how to change it from a regular, basically sort of like they were treating it like an auto case. So
Uh-huh.
in Florida, they have a cap on personal injury cases against the government, against the police department,
Oh, okay.
$200,000. If you could prove a civil rights violation, you get whatever it is.
Oh,
So,
cool.
so to prove the civil rights violation, you had to show that there was either like a lot of police brutality that they were not addressing, usually from the same police officer. They knew there was a problem, the higher authorities, and they
Yeah.
did nothing. That's the quintessential way. If you can't show that there was a lot of prior, beatings, you have to show that there was a need for them to do something. So in my situation, Miami, 1986, there's a lot of homeless people. Everybody knows it, with mental illness. Most
Hmm.
people that are homeless have mental illness. So the police
Yeah.
have a lot of encounters. They're just arresting people. It's already pretty common knowledge that it's a problem because the jails are getting filled with people that they end up having to release a couple of days later. They don't get treatment. They don't want treatment, the whole 9 yards. But the police knew back then that they needed to treat had the mentally ill in a different way. You want to calm the people down. You want to talk them down. You
Hmm.
want to try to find a relative that can intervene. Maybe use, if you have to use force, you're not like bang, bang, bang. You're not doing the stunt gun. There are ways that you can deal with it. Especially if you have 8 officers. If you have one, there's more of an issue. In any event, so I won the trial and then lost the appeal. And the appeal was in front of a judge who had actually worked as an attorney for that same police department. Okay.
Wow. Huh.
So when my father, who's, he's following this, and I, of course, at that point, it was such a big case or whatever that the preeminent appellate
Yeah.
attorney in Florida, Bruce Rogo, he agrees to do the appeal. And Bruce is a great guy. I know he's still practicing. I'm pretty sure. And my father is like, he's like a scrappy guy. He's like, the show East New York that just came out, about, it's actually in Brooklyn. It was like the worst neighborhood in Brooklyn. That's
Hmm.
where he grew up. Okay.
Okay.
So my father's like, do not let this judge, he's got to get out of the case. He's got too much.
Yeah.
So, but Bruce disagreed and said, it's been 10 years. He's not that connected. I'm not going to ask him to, recuse himself. Anyway, so we lost. And
Mm.
I mean, should I go on? I got a couple more of these cases or
No.
whatever.
I mean, it's honestly, this could be like a full hour of just this stuff. It's really interesting. And I can't, that just sounds like it sounds like a Dateline kind of episode or something where it's like,
Yeah,
oh, the judge was like in bed with the mayor and the whatever, like it's just like,
yeah. It's 2 episodes at least,
yeah, exactly. But I guess just because I want to get a chance to hear a little bit about your podcast and
Yeah.
some more lighthearted topics here, like why did you start a podcast? Why
Yeah.
what does it do for you? And what is it like,
So I went from doing all this kind of interesting stuff. I had some interesting whistleblower cases that also went south. And I had another police brutality with a pedophile cop who was chasing young boys and arresting them and then telling them he needed to give them a medical exam for them to get a good deal with the judge and, like get either bail.
Wow.
So he ended up going to jail for 17 years. I know you want me to move on, but that was an
No,
interesting
I
case.
mean,
So it was a 17-mile chase at 3 a.m, and it
people
got
watching, like, okay, stay tuned for a part two because I'm gonna lobby for this if Greg will agree. But anyway.
yeah. All right. So I mean, I don't know. You want me to? I mean, that was even more interesting than this last one.
Uh-huh.
So it was 115 mile. They had a homicide investigation because my client's child. It was the day after high school. They all went to a big party. It's 2 a.m. They got into a fight. They leave the house. This bad police officer, who's a nice guy, but he was pedophile in the closet, gay
Yeah.
police or homosexual police officer. And so he's undercover, and it's in like rural country, Central Florida. He starts chasing after them. So I think it was like a 17-mile chase. And eventually the driver of my client's son's car, careens off the road, hits a tree, car splits in half. The driver survives.
Uh-huh.
The passenger dies. Okay. That becomes his parents became
Wow.
my client, right?
Uh-huh.
So it turned out 2 weeks before that happened, what he was doing is he was feeling like the kids up. He'd take them to a hotel. He just totally bullshitted. We're talking about at least 100 kids that ended up after my client's accident, coming out and saying he did the same thing to me. He would take them to a hotel, give him the exam. He came, he had a board,
Yeah.
like a therapist board or whatever he had or whatever.
Ugh.
And so one of the kids ran away and told his mother, hey, this just freaked me out. This guy just like felt me up or whatever. She goes to the police department, tells them this story. They write it up and then they backdate it because they never put him. They should have suspended him on the spot. Meanwhile, he's driving in an unmarked car, chasing
Wow.
after them for 15 miles. Dispatch is on the phone. They're like, look, it's not a stolen car. He had no reason. So anyway, I ended up losing that case because the judge said I did not show that shocked his conscience, that chase, those circumstances. 15 miles, 117 miles an hour in rural roads. We're not talking about
Yeah, yeah.
I-95 right down, 395, whatever, straight shot. So after that, I moved into a much easier line of work.
I gotcha.
Right. And then it's called Florida's personal injury protection. So, you got to have personal injury protection. So it's a lot easier way to make money. Now I'm already 15 years out of law school. I'm like totally beaten up, tired of losing, sleepless nights, the whole night.
Yeah.
And my buddy, who wasn't much of a brilliant attorney, but was doing that. So, dude, why don't you do this? Just come on over, take all my cases,
Uh-huh.
take half of them or whatever. And I was like, holy shit. You know what? I think I'm going to do it. I can't believe you have that much volume.
Yeah.
But I did that. And then the whole time I've been doing that, which is since 2012, the state of Florida has threatened that they're going to get away. They're going to do away with that. So I keep thinking it's going to end. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to end, but it never ends. The hospitals love it and the medical providers love it, obviously. And people like me love it. But this is the only, people don't have insurance. They get into an accident. They go, instead of going to their doctor, or they can't get into their doctor, they go to the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have urgent care centers, so it's getting a little better, I think, or whatever. Anyway, so I'm just assuming that's going to dry up. And then I decide, hey, you know what? Let me get into the mass tort world and start a podcast. I need to do something else.
Yes. Yeah. A backup plan.
A backup plan. Exactly. Like you,
Yeah.
I'm going to afterwards, I'm going to go and listen to some of your comedy.
Please. Yes. No,
You
I'm,
know,
you'll be after my parents, you'll be the third one. So I
the
appreciate
third,
that.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, I mean, obviously I totally get it. And it's cool to have, not so many lawyers, it's very cerebral, very dry stuff. It's hard to have another outlet, but so many do. I think
yeah.
so many people I meet. So, are the people you talk to on the podcast, are they mostly other attorneys, or like what are you talking about? Other kinds of what do you talk about on it?
Yeah, so there's so many interesting mass torts,
Yeah.
kind of cases right now that or cases with interesting legal information. So like even the pod industry or the cryptocurrency industry,
Mm-hmm.
they always have like a legal, there's always a lawsuit going on,
Yes.
right? The legal, it's usually pretty significant, at least for the survivability of the space or the company, right? So I try to focus on that. Whistleblowers, I like to do whistleblowers. I did a casting director who loved to talk about movies. He's my buddy or whatever. I'm like, can you talk? There's so many movies about the law. Like, why don't let's just, dude, I'm going to just push play and
Yeah.
you're on. And so I did that,
That's awesome.
and
Yeah.
but it's sad how many mass tort cases there are, because it's like the more I see what's really going on and how the
Mm-hmm.
companies operate, and they know that it's like, like in some like the emails that you see are just horrific, and
Right,
anyway,
but this is the kind of stuff that people are so interested in. It's
yeah,
makes the best TV shows and makes the best, articles that everyone wants to share and talk about. So it's definitely really, really interesting stuff. And we can find it. It's what's it called one more time? Cut to the
cut to
chase.
the chase colon. So I had to put the colon in there because there's a bunch of other ones, but it's like a blue background with my triple G.
What
So
are
my
the other cut to the
GRE,
chases?
what's that?
What's the other cut to the chase podcast?
I should, there's a lot of them. If there was only a couple, I probably would have at least looked through the show notes to see what they are. I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
You want to be careful. I don't know, but I'm
right.
sure it's fine.
Yeah.
And the name of you have an Instagram page too, right? That you're
Yeah.
trying
So
to build that.
I'm trying to, slowly. I'm not doing
Mm-hmm.
anything, I just kind of do my thing a couple times a week. Called I'm the mass tort guy, not the mass tort guy, mass tort guy.
Mass tort guy. Like,
One, you know,
yeah, all in one thing. Mass tort guy, like a big tort guy. Got it. All right.
yeah, something like that. You don't want to
Massive.
take the M out of mass, because then
Got it.
that wouldn't work. I mean, it might work in,
Oh,
certain.
no, no, well, yeah, you could have it in a separate account, that maybe a private one. But anyway, Greg, this was
Yeah.
really, really great talking to you, and
All
I
right,
hope
Jeff.
we talk again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate having me on, and I hope the show does well.
Great. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Greg. All right. Again, thank you everyone for watching today's lawyer interviews. And we'd like to thank again our sponsor, Law and Select America's Legal Elite in Media. Connect with Law for custom, innovative, and disruptive branding solutions to accelerate lawyer law firm authority, grow six-figure practices, and aid access to justice.